So I'm here for another All Access interview. Kai Savas here. I'm sitting down with the awesome Tom Holkenborg. Tom, how are you doing this morning? Thanks for joining me so early.
Well, I'm up at 4, so
You never went to sleep. You're still awake.
I mean, like halfway through this recording, it's beer o'clock. You know?
I'm an early bird too, so this is sort of I'm going to jump right into work after this. So for anyone listening, watching, Tom and I have done a bunch of interviews in the past. So if you want to learn more about Tom's, his career path to becoming a composer, definitely check those out because we're going to jump right into things right now. But before we jump into some projects, I did want to talk about just all the work you do on social media, which I think is fantastic with studio time and all of that. I mean, you're giving back so much to the community. You're giving back so much insight and tips and all the things that you do. So how did that start? And when did you decide to kind of dedicate a lot of time to that? Because you really do kind of a great production value with everything.
Well, I think the fact that I'm doing it is normal. The fact that nobody else does it is not normal. You know, uh, ancient societies were built on sharing science and knowledge and philosophy. And that made these old cultures like really great. And I think it's important. So I come from a family where my mom was a music teacher, and at daytime she would give music education to kids. That was her daytime job, and then at night she would also give music lessons, but she would give music lessons to kids of less fortunate families without charging them. That way, a lot of more kids, because I come from a really rural countryside area in Holland that was not necessarily all that rich in the 60s and 70s. It's a little different now, but back in the day. So there were a lot of kids that would not have access, to music education. So that's how it started. And then in 2003-4, I was approached by the biggest music university in Holland to help them set up a 4-year course, very much in the likes of Berklee School of Music. And the specialty was music and media. That's the name of the study. And it's a very wide range from composing to film, video games, but also electronic composition in the most broad form. And sound design, even coding for video games and coding for software, if that's what you wanted to do. And we attracted a bunch of really good teachers. And in the beginning, we made a good splash. And now we're 15 to 17 years later. And now we have like 120 to 140 students on a yearly basis that come from all over the planet, from
Wow.
China, from Germany, from France, from Scandinavia, from England. So it's really great. And so the university and I parted ways in 2015 because I wanted to do other things, and the study was like rolling really great. So they didn't need me anymore. And so I was thinking, okay, what can we do next? And so I was talking to my social media manager, Hisham, to my manager, and a few other bright thinkers. And that's where the idea for Studio Time was born. And the idea of sharing everything that I do with the community uh, in a giving back scenario, because also in Holland, education is for free. And I think it should be for free or almost for free. And so that's why this is for free. In the beginning, the first season was actually really hilarious because we threw a bunch of cameras and some lights, and then it was like, okay, what shall we do? Okay, let's do this, and because we had no idea what people would think. So we did like 10, 12 episodes in that first season, became a big success. And then second season 2 was really well prepared with like 40 episodes. And then season 3, and now we're in season 4. And it's been a really great channel, knowing that what the hate and the negativity can be in the online world. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
remarkably
Yeah.
it's a remarkably warm channel where people advise each other, where people give us feedback what they think. We incorporate that into next episodes, new seasons, and then there's this really broad section, Ask Me Anything, which is like my version of the Reddit thing, and where people can ask all kinds of questions, and it varies from the psychological effects of being a composer to actually really technical nitty gritty things like what drivers for what sound cards and what speakers, and so I'm really happy we're able to do this.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I applaud you for the effort because I know it's not just a simple thing to put on. It's a lot of work for sure.
Yeah, it takes
So
a lot of time. It's not
yeah,
like
it's not just throwing on the camera and throwing it up to YouTube. I mean, editing and framing and mapping out what you're going to say. It's a course. You're an instructor, so it is a lot of times. And I know that the community definitely appreciates it, and I always see the wonderful feedback and everything. But let's all right. So let's jump into Justice League. I know you talked about it a bunch already, but I want to kind of go back to that. When did you find out that that Zack was going to be able to do his version? Did you get that call, and what were you surprised? What were the emotions when you found out this was going to happen?
it wasn't like a night and day experience. It was brewing for a while, and then at a certain point, the year before last, I had multiple phone calls with Zach for the potential fact that it might happen, and he was asking me, how much time do you need? How much budget do you need? How much time recording? And everything that we planned out at the time obviously didn't mean anything at the date that the project officially got greenlit, because now we're full on in Corona. So recording with the whole orchestra was not possible. I had to work in isolation. Zach had to work in isolation. So it was interesting, but then at the same time, a super thrilling year, because uh, I want to make clear that when a movie comes out in a theater or it comes out on a streaming service, there's like a general understanding that I would be potentially just done prior a week to when it comes out in the movie theaters. Usually, this can be up to a year, right? So, for instance, Godzilla versus Kong was completely done in 2018 already. No, 19, the end of 2019, completely done. Army of the Dead was completely done in March 2019. So the rest of the year, I was able to work on Justice League primarily, for almost like for the full 90%.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it was incredible when I did get that phone call, which was, I think, the last week of April, when Zach said, okay, it's full steam ahead, let's do it. And by that time, I had obviously already listened to what I did in 2016 when we were working on the version then. But the cut that we were working on was so different in 2016, because it involved already like heavy influence by DC and Warner Brothers at the time, what the movie needed to be. And I'm not going to get into details in this particular interview. Zach has said
Right, right.
enough about it in the interviews that he said. But
Of course.
it was a stressful time period, and then this dramatic thing happened in his family, which was pretty much like the axe for this project for him,
Yeah. Yeah.
and automatically for me, because when a new director comes in, he wants to clean ship and just work with his own crew, and I totally understand that. There was never harsh feelings against Josh that he wanted to bring in Danny Elfman. That is like, I probably would do the same, just like if I
Right.
were a
Right.
director. So nevertheless, so now the movie is going to happen, and I listened back to the music that I did back then, and it kind of brought me back to that time period of stress and
Yeah.
hurt and
Yeah.
pain. And on the other hand, I thought, well, probably this was the best I could do in 2016, but now we're 4.5 years later, and I've grown so much as a composer. I worked with Peter Jackson and James Cameron, and with Robert Rodriguez, and with Tim Miller, and with so many other, George Miller, great directors. And I was like, I learned so much. It would be stupid not to use that knowledge into delivering the best score for this movie. So I called Zack and I said, would you mind if I start over? And he said, no, by all means, if you feel that's best for the movie, go for it. And and then technically my Mount Everest began, you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, so speaking of Mount Everest, I mean, how do you tackle? When did you start working on it? Did Zach? Were you kind of was he giving you in sections and you would start scoring it, or did you wait till there was like an assembly cut or a lock picture before you started mapping out and structuring? Because for a 4 hour plus movie, I mean, I think just structurally, how did your brain work to kind of start mapping that out?
Well, the movie was already done. So and I'm not talking about the 2016 cut, which was a little under 2 hours, but there was a cut now that was 4 hours and 20 minutes. And so I got it the day after the movie was greenlit. And I saw the whole thing, I think like 10 times over a period of 2, 3 weeks. Um, and really strategize like how to attack this. And you know, a movie like this, I never understood with any film composer, by the way, that they would see a movie once and sit behind the piano and immediately start writing all kinds of things. Like I never got that because um, I want to let it sink in, and I want to make like a plan for myself. It's like, okay, how many themes do I need, and how many moments in the movie that theme needs to be featured, and how do we do this, and how do we do that? Do I need unique instruments that I create from scratch or that I find online for this score? What what type of orchestrations do I want, or what type of sound design do I want, and how much of that do I need to prepare before I start writing? And so we have passed the day now that a director swings by and you sit behind the piano and you kind of roughly play on the piano what you're going to be doing, right? I mean, you have to
Right.
present
Yeah.
the full thing. And since I'm not 100% orchestral writer, and especially in this case, Justice League, it's such a melting pot of all these different cultural influences and different modern styles infused with classical writing. And so there was a lot of lab work that needed to be done, you know. So first there was like a month of lab work to really create the sound, and then I got really into writing all the themes like one by one. And so now we're talking half June, third week of June, and then I presented all the themes and the production and the sound of the movie to Zach. He was thrilled and he was happy as a kid. Uh, and then halfway June or so, that's when I started attacking the most important scenes first in Justice League, then the second most important scenes, and then the third. And so now the movie was covered for 60%. And then we started looking at, okay, what are all the gaps and what shall we do for those gaps? Like something unique or a reiteration of a theme or something light, something like completely left field out of the box, you know? So it's a really like multiple step program. I always compare to people, it's like, it's designing like a new, I don't know, like if you will, an Empire State Building. You're not gonna work on the toilet on the 87th floor first. You know,
Right.
first you're gonna make drawings, and then you get it
Yeah.
approved by the city council, and then you start talking to contractors. And first you start with the foundation, and then the massive rough steel work. And as you progress, the detailing becomes important, and more detailing, and then you start worrying about the carpet in the lobby. You know, you're not thinking about that before there's even a drawing of the building itself.
Absolutely. So I mean, how did you tackle this? Such an ensemble cast, and when you think of a superhero film, you think of the single theme and the superhero is the one protagonist, and I mean, you could argue who the protagonist is of Justice League. There's a lot of focus on Ray Fisher's character Cyborg, which we finally got to see, but of course, Wonder Woman has an amazing arc, and I mean, everybody has an amazing arc. So, how did you decide when you and Hans, of course, worked on the previous films with Zach? How did you decide what thematic material to bring into this one, and what new stuff needed to be done as well?
Pretty much everything was going to be new, um, except for two things, and that is Wonder Woman and Superman. Because Superman, if you will, is a more two-dimensional character. it's a guy who always wants to be good, and he's always like a good guy, and at least in the film so far, and he's noble and he's warm, and he's loyal. So um, it made sense that the theme of Man of Steel trickled over in Batman versus Superman without actually really being changed, and trickling over into Justice League without actually really being changed, because the character is not really changing, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Um, and then if you count out the fact that there is a separate Wonder Woman film, or actually two, where two different composers took their own swing on it, what to do with the theme. Um, what my Wonder Woman theme is doing is basically continuing the course that was set out in Batman versus Superman, and the more rougher sword and sandal type of approach, because that was what Zack was really looking for. Zack never wanted a romantic version of that theme, or a female, if you will, between brackets, version of that theme. He said, okay, she's a woman, but she's most likely the most powerful of all and the most brutal in the fight sequences together with Aquaman. And so because it's really physical contact, the rest is like shooting and have like these unique powers to do things to other people. But Wonder Woman and Aquaman are actually driving swords and spears into people's bodies, you know? So
Yeah, and they're the ones that really take Steppenwolf down. I mean, spoiler alert, but at the end, I mean, that's the most brutal part of it. Yeah.
yeah. So I think so that's the reason why I chose a different course for Wonder Woman than has been portrayed in the two solo movies, and per direction of Zack and my own taste. But I did feel that the Amazon clan was so important in this particular movie that I really wanted to give it not like really orchestral colors, but more like a clan tribe colors, you know, and that's where all these like um, strange world type of sounds come from the Duke and Persian singers, but also percussion from Africa. And it's like a conglomerate of like world music elements being combined for the Wonder Woman part and the Amazon part. And
Yeah, you
the
feel a
other thing
history.
that,
They're like there's like a, it feels like an older history behind the music there, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, like the music for Wonder Woman should always feel like it was always here and it will always be, you know, and that's the quality of world music. If you listen to traditional Persian music or Greek music or traditional African music, you just hear it's been here for thousands of years, and you know it's going to be here for thousands of years in the future. You know, it's not going to go away. And so the same with Indian traditional music. So um, let's move on to Batman. So everything for Batman is completely new, and people said why, and I said, well, let's stick to these same characterizations of what I just said about Man of Steel. It's like Batman goes through quite an incarnation from the Batman versus Superman into Justice League. Batman versus Superman, he was like an older alcoholic guy, and he completely lost his shape, and he was completely troubled by the past of the trauma with his parents, that the Joker killed them. And very different though in this movie. This movie, when we see him for the first time, he's on a mission. We're done with that boo hoo hoo stuff. It's like, let's kick some ass and let's get this Justice League team together with Diane, to fight Steppenwolf and Darkseid. So it was warranted that the music for Batman would be new, and it made the most sense. And then everything else is new, obviously, with no track record of it. The Flash has its own theme that completely took me by surprise how that has been taking off on social media as being the
Yeah,
favorite theme of the
yeah,
movie,
absolutely. Yeah.
which is really great, obviously. There's the Justice League theme for the whole crew. Obviously, that is completely new. And then there's Cyborg, and I think, and a little bit of Aquaman. But Aquaman obviously has two major features in the movie, but they have been taken care of by songs. And then there's the introduction of Barry um, at the doggy daycare, and that has
Yes.
also been taken care of by a song. So so you always have to be a little bit more uh, yeah, just like experimental in thinking and adventurous. Is like if the two major entrances of both those characters are being taken care of by a licensed song, it's like, what do you do after that? Because clearly you cannot set up a theme, and clearly you cannot do the big ta-da kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but it worked out.
Oh, it did. I mean, I was just so impressed at how it all flowed and everything just moved. And I mean, it was just to tackle something of that length is just incredible. So congratulations for finally being able to
Uh,
realize it. It must feel amazing to have that out in the world and have people responding
yeah, it
to it.
feels really good, and it's like um, it's really good, and you know, the warm feedback that I've gotten, not only from fans, so many of them, but also from colleague composers here in town, you know, that have sent me compliments, and so it's really great. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. So let's jump into, of course, now you're working with Zach again. Although you've worked with Zach again, now it's a little bit date, but now it's coming out, Army of the Dead, coming to Netflix. So what were the first conversations you had about music here? Because this is I'm trying to recall, is this your kind of first, I know it's more like action, but is this your kind of first foray into horror, into that horror genre? Or have you done, I'm trying to think, have you done horror in the past?
Yeah, I've done,
Yeah.
and but this is not your typical horror film, so
Not typical.
so the the potential you know, Christopher Young playbook, who's done so many amazing horror scores, right? And
Yes, yes.
it doesn't work here in this movie. So it,
So
so
what did this movie need musically? What were those first conversations, and how did you approach it?
oh well, actually there are two story, without any spoilers at this point, but there are two storylines here that coincide that have nothing to do with this whole horror event that's going on, and so, and those were the two most important ones, and so, and they need actually a very emotional approach instead of horror music, and then Zach and I both agreed that we didn't want to go for an orchestral score and the typical sounds that we would know from these type of movies. So it was a great experiment, and it's very heavy relying on sound design and solo female vocals, and uniquely processed pianos and percussion coming from breaking trees, and really awkward choir sounds, and so it's a great mix of stuff.
This movie must have been so fun though, because this is like kind of like a playground. This is like the kind of thing you hope for, where it's just like we're trying to have fun, we're trying to be exciting, we're trying to also add, give an emotional attachment for the audience. So you mentioned breaking trees. Were there any other cool samples that you were working with, or any unique instrumentation that you wanted to kind of bring in to really kind of flesh out the sound of it?
Well, I mean, like so the breaking trees is one, but then I created like piano sounds from sounds that are not piano to begin with, and that works really great. And I always go back to like to any of the libraries of like weird sounds that I've made over the last 30 years or so, and there's always one that is like perfect for a movie, you know. And then you go through 20 other ones. It's like, oh man, this sounds great, but not for this movie. Maybe the next one, you know.
Yeah. So I mean,
But
it
it's
takes
really
place.
great.
Yeah, it takes place in Vegas, which is such an iconic setting. Where when you think of Vegas, you think of course, the strip, but also the desert and the kind of the color palette. How much does the location? I mean, specifically also for this movie, but just also in general, how much does the setting, the color palette, kind of affect you? Like when you're looking at colors and everything, the costumes affect your color palette. I mean, your sound palette, I guess, would be the more appropriate thing to say.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much about this uh, because I don't want to give anything away. How Vegas looks when we get there. So
Okay. Yeah,
let's
no
leave.
spoilers. No spoilers.
Yeah, let's leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Um, So we talked kind of touching back. So we have some great characters, of course, in Army of the Dead. We also talked about some of the great characters in Justice League, and I do want to point out Ray Fisher's amazing performance of Cyborg, and of course you have some great performances here. How much does an actor's performance really kind of push the emotional side of what you're writing for? Do you really hone in on their kind of just the nuances of what they're doing and try to capture that musically? How does the performance affect you as the writer of the music?
Of course. I mean, like, so the thing is that the music that you're writing, and this is for actually every movie, uh, is that whether it's action music or it's emotional music or it's wrenching music or it's like you're scoring jealousy or you're scoring shame or you despair, whatever it is, sadness. You have to make sure that you stay with your music intensity and complexity at least 10 to 25% underneath what the actor is doing on screen. If the actor is not doing anything, you have potentially more musical tools to score a certain
Right.
scene. But if the actor, for instance, has like a piercing look in his eye, and the camera just stays on him, and that look is so powerful, the way that he acts, you want to be careful what you do with music at that point, because you might just completely overscore the film, and it has an opposite effect. So usually, what the language that is being used in films is that you want people to lean in, and if you do too much as a composer, people lean back, and that's not what you want. You want people to lean in to the movie, invest in a character, invest in the story, and the amount of sound effects, the level at which certain things are mixed, whatever the composer is writing, busy, not busy, what register, what type of instruments, can create the opposite effect of what actually is needed for the scene. So, in short, the answer to your question is yes. Whatever the actor is doing on screen is essential to what you then do with the music after.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought of it that way in terms of like making, yeah, not overstep. Yeah, you can totally overstep and ruin a performance. And I think a lot of people forget how much a performance can be shaped in post production. And sometimes actors will see a movie and go, "Oh wow, that's amazing how it turned out," because it's not like a stage play where they kind of see it
Yeah,
unfold.
well, I mean, there are so many um, amazing YouTube videos online of YouTubers that show the impact of music. If you take like one certain scene from a movie, and then they play like three, four, five, six different types of scores.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are
I-
great.
I'm sure some of the film fans here on your show have done that before, and that's when you truly see the power. Like, unfortunately, in studio time, I am never allowed to use footage of the films that I work on. It's
Right,
just
for
like,
copyright issues. Yeah.
I would love to show this to people, but I do this. I did this in class when I was still running that university. I would bring a scene that I was working on, and then we would play like 10 random different pieces of music underneath. And it just, sometimes the atmosphere would completely change. I mean, like, and I would pick really drastic pieces of music. Like, you would have an emotional scene, and then the music would be Persian traditional music, and then the other would be a really bad softcore French, like lounge song. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
another
absolutely.
song would be like a solo Yiddish violin. Another piece of music would be a singer-songwriter song, really earnestly performed. And that same scene gets a completely different meaning with all these different pieces of music. It's great. You can go from straight up comedy to like really emotional, with the same picture.
Yeah, my favorite are the ones where they take they made it like they turn The Shining into like a romantic comedy. You know, they
Yeah.
re-edit with they re-edit the trailer with some different music, and it completely is completely different. I do want to yet another amazing big film that came out recently. Of course, Kong versus Godzilla, and that's another almost like a playground where you get to just create music that and especially with speaking, we're talking about kind of working with the palette and what's on screen. You have these two giant monsters, iconic monsters, of course, but just when you're scoring those fights, and you have to kind of create momentum, make people feel like these monsters are huge and every motion is. How did you approach that musically, and how did you try to give them a little bit separation to kind of identify both of them musically throughout the film?
Well, I started with without starting on the film itself, because I started writing the themes for the movie before they were shooting the film.
Oh wow,
Uh,
that's great. Yeah, I
and
love hearing
so
that.
the director was playing some of the music that I played on the set really loud on speakers to
Oh,
get
that's awesome. I love
people
hearing that. I love,
it,
and people need to do that more.
to get people amped up. So that was great. But I started with Godzilla, and I wanted to write a theme that was original, but it breathes like 60 years of Godzilla history, that had to shine through that theme, and uh, and many people picked up on that, and that is great. And for Kong, I wanted to score a theme that was deeply rooted in the rich history of Hollywood and monster movies, because Godzilla was never a Hollywood character, right? It was
Yeah,
always
absolutely.
so it always had its own funky approach, not only how it looked, but also the soundtrack. I mean, it's kind of hilarious that the original theme from the sort of action music of Godzilla was like dun 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 dun, and it's actually it's comedic. It's to me it doesn't feel like whoa Godzilla. I start laughing when I hear that. And
Yeah.
back in the day, it was like such a perfect match with like the tongue-in-cheek version of Godzilla, and I've been a fan of these Godzilla movies for so long. I have all 36 movies. I know them inside out, and my favorite one is Godzilla versus Biollante when he's fighting like a massive rose or something. It's too much for words, but. But anyway, Kong is a way more serious character and way closer to a human being, if not, a human being. And Kong never had the development of Godzilla, because Godzilla went everywhere and nowhere, right? In his character. Then he was the enemy of Tokyo, then he was the big friend, and then he was this, and then he was that. Whereas the three major King Kong movies that were made were technically the same story again. You know, the original Max Steiner scored one, and then the one in 76, 77.
Yeah, John Barry, I think, did that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Peter Jackson one with like an
Yeah.
insanely beautiful score by John James Nowell. And so and so they started taking some risk with Kong when Skull Island was released like a couple of years ago, where it was Kong in a different setting, just like
Yeah.
a different world but recognizable. So that's the first time they actually did that. Whereas in this movie, it feels a little bit more like the traditional Kong, but a new story about him, finding the home where he came from. So
Yeah, the
that's
whole Hollow Earth thing was really crazy and
yeah,
cool. That scoring that his journey back home and everything. Yeah.
yeah. And um, so by having these two very distinctive themes, it's easy in an action sequence that but when Godzilla has the upper hand, you just bam, you just drop the theme for Godzilla, and then the same for Kong, and then there's like some mashups. But what's important with these massive battle scenes is that you really have a good conversation with the director and the sound design team, like who gets priority and where is that going to happen. Because when these two animals roar at each other, like during the fight in Hong Kong, there's like sections of 3 to 5 minutes where I said, I don't think I should be doing much here because of the insane sound. And then we settled on some propulsive bass lines and a little bit of percussion. And then there would be a moment where it's like, boof, the themes come in really, really big. And that's when the sound design is like quite mixed significantly lower so that the music takes over there, and then it goes back into sound design. You know what I mean? So it's constantly like
Yeah, yeah.
give and take.
I mean, I was actually going to ask you about that because from just across from Justice League to Army of the Dead to Kong, and this is not new territory for you. You've scored so many action heavy films, and I think I've talked to a lot of filmmakers about that. Sorry, composers about scoring those because you really do have to pay attention to the sound design and so your music doesn't get lost, but also that your music is actually adding something to the mix. And do you normally get that opportunity, or have you had situations where you see the final product and everything is just mixed kind of a mess and you go, oh no, everything is kind of lost?
I think it has a lot to do with with dialogue that the composer has with the sound design team. The sound design team is always ready to receive a composer with open arms, but there's not a lot of willingness among some composers to even consider the sound design team as a partner in what they're doing. It feels more like they're both the teams are fighting each other sometimes. Whereas the composer wants his music louder, and the design team doesn't want to pull the sound design down, which is basically you can consider it a bad composition if like a composer writes like a main melody in the lower cello but has a second melody in the higher basses, and they constantly clash with each other. You composed a bad piece of music. So
Right.
and so if you zoom out and you take an eagle's bird eye view on the total mix, dialogue, sound effects, foley, and music need to fit like a glove in each other. So when there are certain types of dialogue, don't score certain types of music. If sound effects are really heavy, like in 300 Rise of an Empire, there's a lot of swords clanging and all that stuff. Of course, you're not going to write a piece of music for metal drums and chains and all that stuff, because that's
Right.
the same frequency range. So I think the collaboration is really important, especially when you write music like I do, because I do so much music sound design. So you need to be in sync with the sound design people. If you're a John Williams type composer only using the orchestra, there is potentially less clashing between what he is writing and the sound design team, because it's such a different character in sound, and it doesn't clash as easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a balanced kind of dance that you have to have, and I think collaboration. I think communication is the key. I
Yeah.
I think more people need to communicate, and if everyone's working kind of siloed in their little pods, and then when it comes time to push everything together, there's going to be problems for sure. So just to kind of wrap things up as we close down, I want to talk to just looking at your career at this point. You mentioned how you threw everything out from the original Justice League because you've grown as a composer. You've had the most, I think, for me, the most interesting musical career starting out in Europe and the career you had and moving to Hollywood and starting your composing career. Where do you see yourself at this point in your life? Do you have like goals, like creative goals that you want to achieve? Are you still looking for, you're trying to learn more about a certain subject? You want to score certain genres a little bit more? Like, do you kind of think about these things, or are you just kind of along for the ride and you're just happy with, working with your friends and your collaborators? And so I'm just kind of curious just how you
And
see your
I,
career.
No, I'm not the latter type person. I actually am, but the point is that um, my brain is like it's so filled with curiosity that I always want to learn new things. Like I'm studying uh, language number 5 right now, Portuguese. I want to be able to speak Portuguese fluently. Besides that, I'm already speaking Dutch, English, French, and German. And so I want to control that. Then uh, I am a really good chef, but I want to be an even better chef. I got an incredible coffee machine because I have such love for coffee, and I want to be an incredible barista. So I'm practicing. I know how to dial in my espresso machine and my coffee. And um, right now, I'm actually building a bunch of electronic things because that's technically how my career ever started as an electro engineer. So
Right. Yeah.
when in my 12, 13, 14 years old, So I'm actually building guitar stuff and guitar pedals right now in the night hours. And then in the daytime, I write music. I constantly study music. On Sundays, I study classical symphonies that I never got to studying when I was younger. I read lots of interviews with um, people or books that analyze like a certain composer's life. And I'm not talking about film composing. I'm talking about original composers. Then I have this insane interest in all the modern music styles out there, like electronic music, alternative guitar, sound design music, new classical composition. I mean, I think, like I was talking the other day, I'm going to invent the 48-hour day. Uh, there's the need for it. So I
You've
have,
always, yeah.
I don't have enough time. Then I'm a cycling fanatic, so I'm following the Giro d'Italia right now. Um, um, I love watching really great movies and great TV shows. I also try to keep up with like great things that are coming out on Netflix, Hulu, Apple, Amazon, you name it. So it's like, man, I come hours too short. The next thing I want to tackle is calligraphy, just like
Oh,
really like
wow. Yeah.
classic 16th century writing, 17th century. I
Wow.
got papers, I got the pens, I got the ink, and so it's like there's so many things that I love, man. It's like, and I want to get good at it. It's a hunger that is not, it doesn't get stilled, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, and I see that. I mean, I hear that in your music because every score I hear, it feels like new ideas are coming in, and I love how you kind of. It seemed, yeah, you seem like you're just a sponge trying to absorb as much as you can, and you've always been this kind of tinkering, gearhead as well, and loving to experiment with sounds, and that's what I've always appreciated about your music. But that's good to hear that you are, in other areas as well, and taking all these different hobbies and interests. I think that enriches yourself, and that makes you a better storyteller. And I think I've enjoyed watching your music grow over the years, so it's been such a pleasure for me as a listener. And
Oh, that's so great to hear. And it's like it's what's really great and amazing about my profession, and it always has been, is that with whatever I do, um, uh, there's always like a few people somewhere in the world that get emotional listening to something that you do, that have to smile because of something that you do, or they talk with one or two friends about it. And even the fact that you do something on a yearly basis that touches like a few people around the planet that say, oh, that is my song. That is so amazing that you do something that makes people happy. And the cool thing I like about film composition compared to what I was before, an artist, I would always, I've done shows, for instance, the gay parade in Italy. It was like 1 million people there,
yeah, yeah,
I played. And so it was insane. I played for so many big crowds. I played Coachella twice here in California. And so um, that was great. But then I was like right in the forefront, just like 40 plus, right? And now I'm working more behind the scenes. Like sometimes I see movies that I worked on pre-corona, and I would go to the theater and I would see Deadpool, and the whole place is packed and everybody's laughing and screaming, but nobody knows I did the music. And it's so great. You get like a real experience what people feel, when they see something. And you can't, there's not a moment you go home with like a bigger smile than that people were happy to see something you worked on. And that is like an incredible job to have. It doesn't get better.
yeah. I think just being able, because you work so closed off in your room and you're kind of isolated from most of what you do, but then to see how it goes out in the world and affects people,
You
I
have
think that's
to. Yeah,
that's the beautiful part about, I think, just filmmaking in general and storytelling. It connects
yeah,
people, and it connects the human condition, and that's why I fell in love with it. So
yeah. You can't just like in any form of art just lock yourself up like how do you call somebody that lives in the
like a
deep,
recluse.
exactly, like a recluse, and just like uh, make your music and never go out in the real life to experience how people are experiencing it. And it's like it's incredible sometimes that you create something and you feel, oh, this is very emotional to me, and then you play it to 10 people and you said, okay, I like it, but doesn't it doesn't hit me, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so clearly you can still go to battle with these 10 people that this is the most emotional music that you wrote, but clearly those people don't think it's emotional, you know. It's like, so you're doing something wrong. And so, and it's the same as scary music, you know, it's just like, oh, this is so scary, and then somebody says, no, it's not, it's okay, but it's not scary, you know. And then so those are the things you really experience when you go out into the world and experience a movie with a test audience or with a focus group, or with eventually when it comes out. Sometimes you work on a scene, for instance, that the the relief that people felt in the theater when the first action sequence was over in Mad Max, you know, when everything ends in that
Oh,
massive
yes.
storm, and Max wakes up in the morning with those little sand things that
Yes.
fall off his head. But I mean, we saw the movie and it's like, oh man, what a great new sequence. Okay, let's go. And then I saw that thing in the theater, and people, when the first action was over, was like, ah, God damn it, come on, yeah, you know, like that. It was insane. I mean, there was such, and then for instance, the jokes in Deadpool, I thought they were funny, but when I was in the theater, like people were crying of laughing. You know, it's just
It's such a connecting thing, and I work in animation, so it's a similar feeling when you see something you're working on go out. But Tom, I know you're busy, you have a busy schedule ahead of you, and I just wanted to thank you for chatting this morning. It's so great to catch up, and it's been a while since we talked. So thank you for your time and for sharing some of
awesome.
your insight.
Well, I'm sure our paths will cross again.